From the second Ryan and I stepped into the backyard, I felt it. Something was off. The air was heavy, thick with chatter that died down just a little too quickly when I walked by. Neighbors smiled, but the smiles felt wrong, stiff, like masks that didn't quite fit. The scent of grilled burgers filled the air, but it couldn't drown out the uneasy energy pulsing around me. Every burst of laughter seemed sharper, almost pointed, like it carried a hidden message meant to cut. I gripped Ryan's arm tighter, as if his presence might steady me, though deep down I already knew it wouldn't. I leaned toward him, lowering my voice. "Why are people looking at me like that? Did I miss something?" I asked, forcing a polite smile to cover the panic starting to creep in. Ryan barely glanced at me, shrugging like he always did when he wanted to brush me off. "You're imagining things, Emily. Just relax." But his tone was too quick, too practiced. The words rolled off his tongue like a line he'd rehearsed. Instead of calming me, they dug a deeper pit in my stomach. Then I heard it, a whisper carried by the breeze, sharp enough to pierce right through the noise of the party. Poor thing. She doesn't even know. My heart skipped, my smile faltered, and suddenly the sound of laughter around me felt like knives. I scanned the crowd, desperate to catch whose lips had spoken those words. But all I saw were glances, half-smiles, and eyes that darted away too fast. In that moment, a chill washed over me, and I realized I wasn't paranoid at all. They knew something I didn't, and it was about me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being dramatic, but my body betrayed me. My hands felt clammy, my throat dry, like I'd swallowed sand. I nodded and smiled when people walked past, but every glance lingered too long. Every whisper seemed to land on my shoulders. It was like the whole neighborhood had been let in on a secret, and I was the punchline. The more I tried to act normal, the more out of place I felt. My skin prickled under the weight of their stares, and I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. This was supposed to be a casual barbecue, not a public trial. Ryan, of course, floated through it all with ease. He laughed at jokes, clapped neighbors on the back, and sipped his beer as if nothing was wrong. Watching him made my stomach twist. How could he be so comfortable when I felt like the ground beneath me was cracking open? I leaned closer again, trying to read his face. "Are you sure I'm imagining this?" I asked, but he avoided my eyes, keeping his smile fixed on someone across the yard. That avoidance told me more than his words ever could. The strangest part was how familiar it all felt, like a scene I'd seen play out in movies but never thought I'd live. I was the woman standing in the middle of a crowd, smiling politely while everyone around her shared a cruel inside joke. The laughter wasn't mine, the comfort wasn't mine, and the truth, whatever it was, clearly wasn't mine either. And though I tried to steady my breathing, I couldn't shake the thought that I was about to uncover something that would change everything. I drifted from one small group to another, clutching my cup like it was the only thing anchoring me. Their conversations blurred together, but every so often I caught a word, a glance, a smirk. My ears buzzed with fragments I couldn't quite piece together. It was like standing in front of a locked door, hearing voices on the other side, knowing they were talking about you, but never being allowed in. The not knowing was worse than any answer. My chest tightened with every second that passed, and I felt myself shrinking in a place I'd once felt at home. When I tried to focus on the little things, the flicker of the tiki torches, the smoke rising from the grill, the kids laughing near the swing set, it only made the tension sharper. Normalcy surrounded me, yet I was stuck in a reality that felt anything but normal. I caught one woman nudging her friend, whispering behind her hand before they both looked straight at me. My cheeks burned, and I forced another smile, the kind that begged them not to see how rattled I really was. But deep down, I knew they already saw it. By the time the sun dipped lower and fairy lights began to glow, I felt like I was suffocating. Each laugh, each side glance, Each muttered word dug into me until I could no longer pretend it was in my head. Something was going on, and everyone here knew it but me. And as I stood there, clutching my cup, one thought pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't push away. Whatever secret they were holding, it had Ryan written all over it. I made my way to the drinks table, trying to pull myself together. If I couldn't shake the tension, at least I could cover it with small talk. That's when I spotted Linda, my neighbor, the one who always had a kind smile and a knack for knowing everything that happened on our street. She greeted me warmly, but I noticed the way her eyes darted, as if she wasn't sure how close she wanted to stand. I forced a light laugh, swirling the lemonade in my cup. "You all seem to be in on a joke tonight. Care to share?" I asked, trying to keep it playful even though my heart was pounding. For a second, Linda froze. Just a flicker, but I caught it. Then she plastered on that friendly smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, nothing. Just neighbor talk." "Don't worry," she said, waving her hand like it was nothing. But I knew better. I'd lived next door to her long enough to recognize the way she hesitated, the way her voice dipped lower as if she was covering for something. That tiny pause spoke louder than her words, and it gnawed at me. I sipped my drink, nodding as if I believed her, but my chest was tightening again. I wanted to shake her, demand the truth, but I stayed quiet. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us until she excused herself to refill her plate. Watching her walk away, I felt the hollow ache of certainty. Whatever was being whispered tonight, Linda knew it, and she had just chosen to protect someone else instead of me. I tried to steady myself, moving through the crowd like everything was fine, but inside, my nerves were fraying. Every time I caught someone's eye, they looked away too quickly, like kids caught whispering during class. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, but the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. When laughter erupted across the yard, I couldn't help but wonder if it was at my expense. I was an outsider in my own neighborhood, a guest at an event where everyone else seemed to know the script but me. I was pouring another drink when it happened. A neighbor, one I barely knew, stumbled over, clearly drunk, his words slurring. He leaned too close, his breath heavy with beer, and blurted out, "If my husband had a girlfriend, I'd want someone to tell me too." The sentence hit me like a slap, cutting through the noise of the party. My hand froze mid-pour, lemonade splashing over the rim of the cup as his words echoed in my head. I turned sharply, my voice sharper than I intended. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" I asked, staring at him, searching his face for a trace of humor, a sign it was a joke. But his eyes widened, panic flashing across his expression as if he'd said too much. He stammered, waving his hands. No, forget it. Just talking nonsense. Too much to drink." But it was too late. The damage was done. My heart was already sinking into the pit of my stomach, because deep down, I knew he hadn't been talking nonsense at all. I stood there frozen, the cup trembling in my hand, lemonade dripping down my fingers. Around me, the party carried on like nothing had happened. Kids running, music playing, neighbors chatting. But I felt like the world had tilted beneath my feet. His words echoed again and again. If my husband had a girlfriend. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the noise. In that instant, the whispers, the glances, the strained smiles, they all began to make sense. I was the fool in the middle of a story everyone else already knew. I tried to compose myself, forcing my lips into a smile when another neighbor walked by, but my mind was spinning. Questions piled on top of one another. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Why did they know before I did? The humiliation burned hotter than anger. It wasn't just betrayal, it was exposure. My private life had become a neighborhood secret, and I had been left in the dark. That sting cut deeper than I was prepared for. As Ryan laughed loudly across the yard, oblivious or maybe pretending to be, I felt something shift inside me. The fear gave way to a simmering resolve. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of the truth from tipsy neighbors or coy smiles. If there was something to uncover, I would find it myself. And as I set my sticky cup down on the table, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight had changed everything. The ride home felt endless, even though the barbecue was only a few streets away. I stared out the window, my reflection blurred against the glass, while Ryan hummed along to the radio like nothing was wrong. My hands were clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached. By the time we walked through the door, the dam inside me broke. I turned to him, my voice sharp, steady, and louder than I expected. Everyone was staring at me tonight like I was the town fool. Who is she, Ryan? He froze, keys still in his hand, before tossing them onto the counter with a clatter. You're paranoid, he snapped, his voice rising like he could scare the question away. Stop listening to gossip. His defensiveness poured gasoline on my fire. It wasn't just his words. It was the way his eyes darted, the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his chest rose faster with each breath. He was cornered, and I could see it plain as day. I didn't shout back. Instead, I leveled my voice, calm but cutting. Gossip doesn't explain why the whole neighborhood knows something I don't. And it doesn't explain the hotel charges I saw on the card last month. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. His face drained of color, and for a second, he looked like a man caught in the light with nowhere to run. Then he tried. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. But silence, his silence, said more than any denial ever could. I stood in the living room, my chest heaving, as the front door clicked shut behind him. The echo of it rattled through the house, but instead of breaking me, it hardened something inside. I wasn't crying, not this time. My tears had been wasted on small arguments and late-night excuses long before this. Tonight, I wasn't sad. I was humiliated, furious, and strangely clear. The truth was finally staring me in the face, and I couldn't unsee it. Walking to the counter, I picked up his keys where he had tossed them. Cold metal against my palm, they felt like evidence of the life I thought I knew, one that had just crumbled. My mind replayed the barbecue, the whispers, the drunk neighbor's slip, Linda's hesitation. They weren't isolated moments, they were puzzle pieces. And Ryan's silence tonight was the final piece snapping into place. He was guilty, and worse, he'd let me carry the weight of ignorance while everyone else looked on. I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply, forcing myself not to spiral into despair. Instead, I let the anger sharpen me, steady me. I thought of all the times I had defended him, brushed off suspicions, convinced myself I was imagining things. No more. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "You made me the fool, Ryan, but not anymore." And as the words left my lips, I felt a spark, small but fierce, of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. I walked through the house slowly, almost like I was seeing it for the first time. The framed photos on the walls, the couch where we'd shared countless movie nights, the kitchen where we'd laughed over burned pancakes, it all felt staged now, like props in a play I hadn't realized I was in. How many of those moments had been real? And how many had been lies dressed up as love? The thought cut deep, but instead of breaking me, it fueled me. I wasn't the naive wife he assumed I'd always be. I thought back to the hotel charges I had brushed off with his half-hearted excuse about a business dinner. My stomach turned at my own willingness to accept less than the truth. But standing here tonight, everything clicked into place. His absences, his sudden showers after late nights, the way he grew defensive when I asked simple questions. The story had been right in front of me all along. I had just been too trusting to see it. That realization burned hotter than fire. As I stood there, the house silent around me, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to crumble, and I wasn't going to confront him with tears. That's what he would expect. No, I would take my time, gather every detail, every piece of proof, and when I finally confronted him again, it wouldn't be in anger. It would be in control. He thought tonight ended with me broken. But he had no idea it was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a weight in my chest. But it wasn't despair. It was resolve. My pillow wasn't damp with tears. My eyes weren't swollen. Instead, I felt a calmness that almost startled me. I brewed my coffee, listening to the steady drip, and thought, enough is enough. If Ryan wanted to humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood, then I would strip away the last scraps of his respectability. But first, I needed the truth. Not just whispers, not just hints, proof I could hold in my hands. I picked up the phone and called Linda. My voice didn't tremble. It was steady, almost cold. Linda, I said, I know you've heard things. Tell me everything. I need the truth. There was a pause on the other end, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Then she let out a long sigh, the kind that carried both pity and guilt. Emily, Ryan's been seeing that woman from the yoga studio. Everyone's seen them around town. We thought you knew. Her voice cracked with hesitation, but the words landed sharp and clear. I gripped the counter, the ceramic mug warm in my hand, but my blood ran cold. So it was true. The yoga studio, of course. That explained the evenings he claimed to be working late, the fresh gym clothes I never saw him sweat in. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Instead, a steel-like calm took over. Thank you, Linda, I whispered. And as I hung up, I felt the shape of my plan forming. If Ryan thought I'd stay silent, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I spent the rest of the day in quiet motion, my mind sharper than it had been in months. I dug through drawers, checked the pockets of his jackets, and scrolled through old bank statements I'd once ignored. The clues piled up like bricks, receipts from restaurants we'd never visited together, charges for hotel stays that didn't match his business trips, text alerts that suddenly seemed suspicious. Each new piece didn't break me. It built me. With every discovery, my anger crystallized into something powerful, almost electric. I remembered a time when I would have confronted him right away, desperate for answers, clinging to the hope of an apology. But that woman was gone. I wasn't chasing explanations anymore. I was collecting ammunition. I took photos of receipts, screenshotted suspicious texts, tucked every scrap of evidence into a neat folder on my laptop. It wasn't just about knowing the truth. It was about holding it, controlling it, being ready to wield it when the time came. As I sat back, staring at the growing file, a strange calm settled over me. It was almost liberating, like stepping out of fog and finally seeing the road ahead. Ryan had chosen to betray me, to let the entire neighborhood watch me stumble in ignorance. That was his mistake. My mistake would have been staying quiet, and I had no intention of making that mistake ever again. That night, while Ryan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every snore from his side of the bed made my stomach tighten, not with sadness anymore, but with determination. I turned my head and studied his face in the dim light, wondering how many lies he'd whispered to me with the same lips that kissed someone else. For the first time, I didn't feel weak. I felt fueled. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to expose him. I pictured the neighborhood, those same eyes that had looked at me with pity and judgment. I wanted them to see the truth with no room for denial. No chance for Ryan to twist the story. He had paraded me around like the fool, smiling while whispers circled behind my back. That humiliation burned deep, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let this end in silence, tucked away behind closed doors. His betrayal would be dragged out into the light, exactly where it belonged. As I closed my eyes, the outline of my plan sharpened. Gather everything, wait for the perfect moment, and strike where it would hurt him most. His reputation. Ryan thrived on being the charming neighbor, the reliable man everyone liked. That image was his armor, and I was about to shatter it in front of the very people he sought to impress. With that thought steadying me, I finally drifted into sleep, not as the broken wife he assumed I was, but as the woman who would decide how this story ended. I walked into the next neighborhood gathering alone, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt steady. My hands held a stack of photos, each one a tiny, undeniable truth. Hotel lobbies, dinner receipts, a car in a dark lot. People looked up when I entered, those same faces that had watched me as if I were the joke. But this time the looks were different. They weren't pitying me. They were curious, waiting for the next beat of the story they'd already half told. I set the photos on my palm like a dealer laying down cards, feeling the weight of every snapshot like proof in my pocket. I inhaled, let the night air fill me, and then walked to the center of the yard where everyone's attention pooled like a tide. I cleared my throat, loud enough to cut through the hum of small talk and the clink of glasses. "Since you all seemed to know before I did," I said, my voice calm, "let's make it official." The words landed with a soft shock, too pointed to be mistaken as drama, too controlled to be a scene. People shifted. Whispers flared and died as eyes swung toward the photos in my hand. I didn't shout, didn't beg for attention. I simply placed the first picture where everyone could see it. It showed Ryan and the woman from yoga tucked into a hotel corner, hands too familiar to be friendly. The air tightened, electric and thin, as murmurs rose and fell around me. Ryan's face went from confusion to color draining away like paint running in rain. He stepped forward, hands out, trying for reason or denial, some practiced defense I'd watched him use before. But I didn't give him the private space he wanted. This was public, and he'd made the humiliation public. "This is how you've been living your nights," I said softly, and then let the next photo fall into their sight. As the neighbors gathered closer, pages of proof between my fingers, I felt a fierce, strange relief bloom through me. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the second photo landed, this one of Ryan and her leaving a restaurant, his hand pressed lightly against the small of her back. The kind of touch I hadn't felt from him in months. The neighbors leaned closer, their whispers turning into sharp little daggers that cut through the night. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with the guilty relief of finally seeing the truth in daylight. But what mattered most was Ryan, his jaw tight, his voice rising, desperate. "Emily, stop this," he hissed, the panic cracking through his polished tone. "We can talk about this privately." I tilted my head, my eyes locking on his, my voice even. "No, Ryan. You made me the fool in public, and now you'll pay in public too." The words didn't shake. They landed heavy, the way I meant them to. His protests fell flat, drowned out by the neighbors' muttering, their eyes narrowing as years of charm unraveled in seconds. I could almost feel their judgment shift, no longer pitying me but condemning him. The man who had once been the friendly, dependable neighbor was standing exposed, stripped bare by his own choices. He tried again, stepping closer, his hand half raised as if reaching for mine, but I let the third photo slip from my grip and flutter to the ground. In it, his car was parked behind the yoga studio after hours, unmistakable in the glow of the street lamp. The reaction around us was immediate, an audible gasp, a woman shaking her head, a man muttering, "Unbelievable." Ryan's face flushed crimson, his hands trembling as he realized there was no spinning this anymore. And in that moment, I knew I had taken back every ounce of power he'd stolen from me. I let the last photo fall, this one of him and her in his car, their faces lit up with laughter, oblivious to the world around them. The silence that followed was deafening, thick enough to cut, broken only by the sound of Ryan's uneven breathing. He reached for me again, his voice cracking this time, stripped of all authority. "Emily, please, let's just go home. We can fix this. We can talk." But I stood my ground, my arms crossed, my head high, feeling taller than I ever had before. "No, Ryan," I said calmly. "You lost the right to fix this the moment you let everyone else see the truth before I did." The neighbors closed in, not with warmth but with judgment that pressed on him from all sides. I saw the shift. The same people who once adored him now whispering words of disgust, shaking their heads. He tried to smile, to charm, but no one was buying it anymore. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking under their gaze. He was. I felt the burn of their pity for me transform into respect, quiet but steady, like a tide turning in my favor. And in that moment, I wasn't the fool. I wasn't the betrayed wife. I was the woman who finally set the record straight. With the evidence scattered at their feet, I turned, gathering my things with slow, deliberate movements. The night air was cool against my face, refreshing, almost cleansing as I walked toward the gate. I didn't rush, didn't look back. I wanted him to feel every second of my silence, every eye that followed me instead of him. The weight that had sat heavy on my chest for weeks was gone, replaced with something new. Freedom. And as I stepped out of that backyard, leaving Ryan to drown in his shame, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a life where my story would no longer be written by his betrayal. Months have passed since that night, and the air around me feels lighter, like the heaviness has finally lifted. The whispers that once cut into me have quieted, replaced by genuine greetings and warm smiles when I pass my neighbors. I host my own small gatherings now. Nothing grand, just simple dinners with laughter that feels real. The same backyard where I once stood humiliated has become a place of healing, where I reclaim my voice. It's strange, but I no longer hear pity in people's tone when they speak to me. Instead, I hear respect, and I carry it with pride. Ryan is gone, moved away after the divorce finalized, his reputation shredded along with our marriage. I don't ask where he went or who he's with. It doesn't matter anymore. The man who once defined my life has become a shadow I no longer chase. At first, the quiet nights felt unfamiliar, almost haunting, but now they feel like freedom. I fill them with books, long walks, and the kind of peace I used to think only existed in other people's homes. The silence no longer scares me. It comforts me, like a soft blanket around my shoulders. One evening, as I poured wine for a new friend on my porch, she asked me if I ever missed being married. I smiled, feeling the weight of the question, but also the lightness of my answer. "I used to think being married was my strength," I told her, my voice steady. "But it turns out, leaving him was." She nodded, and we clinked glasses, the sound ringing like a promise. I looked around my home, my life rebuilt piece by piece, stronger than before. And in that moment, I knew the secret everyone once whispered about wasn't mine anymore. It was his, and it destroyed only him.